Good morning, my name is Josh from Cyclones Oz, and today we're going to be tracking the weather mainly for Queensland. We're going to start off by looking at far northern Queensland and the rainfall threat for later this week into this weekend, and then we're going to go down south and talk about the rainfall that has been occurring across a large swathe of southeastern Queensland overnight, and then we're going to be talking about some thunderstorms that are expected to fire up across South Australia and New South Wales a little bit later on in the video. Starting things off, of course, with far northern Queensland, you can see a lot of rain has been falling around the Townsville and down towards the Mackay sort of region as well overnight, extending up towards Cairns and adjacent communities up there. In fact, we've had over 100 millimetres in some areas, which totals up to about 300 millimetres over the past 3 days. A lot more rainfall than what was initially forecast for some areas, but as I have said in previous videos before, the models do a terrible job at predicting the rainfall for some certain areas, especially outside of Cairns around the Innisfail area. Considering the mountainous terrain there, the forecast models can have a very hard time predicting exactly what rainfall is expected, and that's also the case for the hills outside of Mackay. They've had a lot of rainfall overnight, and there's some pretty gnarly thunderstorms now moving offshore, but the rainfall should be easing off for areas closer to the Sunshine Coastline between Rockhampton up towards Bowen and Townsville, including Hamilton Island, which I believe did get smashed by up towards 50 millimetres last night in a very short amount of time. So there was certainly a little bit of flash flooding occurring across central coastal Queensland, and there's also a little bit of flooding now occurring across parts of the Gulf of Carpentaria region around Burketown and Georgetown. There's some rivers approaching moderate flooding alerts there because they have had such a vast amount of rainfall over the past 48 hours. Now, the rainfall, thankfully, should be easing off in these saturated communities throughout the course of today. There will still be the odd thunderstorm here and there, but we're probably going to have 2 or 3 days of drier conditions until about Thursday, when the rainfall should pick up once again for northern Queensland. Now, I know this forecast model here looks like there's an awful lot of rainfall this afternoon and this evening for far northern Queensland, but this is just screaming pulse thunderstorms to me. This isn't screaming anything major in terms of widespread torrential rainfall. There will be places that pick up a very high rainfall accumulation tonight and into tomorrow as well from these pulse thunderstorms, but it will be very isolated and quite widespread by the looks of things. Wednesday as well, remaining dry. The worst of the rainfall should be closer to the coastline and definitely on the Cape York Peninsula, although it looks like we might get 1 or 2 pretty strong thunderstorms Wednesday evening, but it looks like we're going to see this very consistent moderate to heavy rainfall set in from Thursday afternoon for the Cairns and Innisfail sort of Cassowary Coast area, and that will persist into Friday and then into Saturday as well, hopefully easing off Saturday, but it looks like inland Queensland, the Northern Territory and South Australia pick up the rainfall then, and it looks like it's going to be a very wet Easter for parts of Central Australia, but again, more on that later on in the video. If we're going to talk rainfall accumulations, at least over the next 24 hours, I'm not seeing anything catastrophic or world-ending up in far northern Queensland. 50 millimetres though, and again, with the forecast models frequently getting these rainfall accumulations wrong, we could probably say comfortably up towards 75 millimetres in the wettest of locations can be expected, which I do believe 75 millimetres is probably the roof of rainfall accumulation today. Over the next 3 days, where there could be quite a bit of rainfall falling, especially over the Cape York Peninsula, possibly up towards 100 millimetres in 1 or 2 locations, especially outside of Cairns. The rainfall should be quite widespread at this point, so I can say with a high degree of certainty that the majority of the central Cape York Peninsula should be receiving up towards 100 millimetres across Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, and then the rainfall does shift closer to the coastline. We see rainfall accumulations around the Innisfail, Tully and Cardwell area approaching 150 millimetres or so, which is a significant drop on yesterday's forecast. The Axis G3 really still does talk up this rainfall event. You can see that over the next 10 days, or 5 days, they're still expecting up towards that 300 millimetre mark. But again, that's about only 60% of what they were calling for yesterday. So I do believe that the forecast models have just finally started to cave in on their initial rainfall forecast, which means that less rainfall can be expected. Still though, up towards 250 millimetres, that's quite a significant fall to happen between Cairns and Cooktown, especially considering how much rainfall they have received this year. That is quite a significant fall and will likely cause flooding in some areas. Over the far north, there will be a little bit more rainfall over the next 10 days as well, especially into the Northern Territory, where there will be places picking up towards 150 millimetres, but it looks like this rainfall is going to be fairly consistent over the next 10 days, falling in about 20 to 30 millimetre falls every day or every other day for the next 10 days. There'll be 1 or 2 wet spots up there as well that could pick up a significantly higher amount of rainfall, but again, nothing unusual for this time of the year. We are still in March. I don't think we should be getting fooled that the wet season is well and truly over yet, but it will be pretty soon. You're definitely into the last couple of weeks of this solid, consistent rainfall, and it looks like this might be the last push of very heavy rainfall for the Cairns area. So that's some very good news up there, because they are very much sick of the rainfall. I think all of Queensland is at this point. So again, over the next 3 days, the remainder of this rainfall event could drop a further 100 millimetres for some locations, especially on the Sunshine Coast and down towards Redcliffe and Brisbane. That does look like the wet spot for the rainfall event that's just moving through here right now. If we were to take a look at the radar imagery, again, nothing too crazy occurring right now. The rainfall is not heavy by any stretch of the imagination, but it is moderate. Light to moderate falls that could last for about 12 hours will likely still cause some minor flooding and some flash flooding in some locations here and there around the Gold Coast and Brisbane. It isn't anything crazy, it isn't anything really alarming at this point, but again, this heavy rainfall that has been going on for the past bunch of hours, it is still flying up a couple of red flags in terms of what flooding could be expected. And again, it is fairly slow moving as well. It isn't moving that fast, so it looks like areas around the Brisbane sort of area could still pick up a substantial amount of rainfall throughout the course of today. But once again, nothing crazy, nothing absurd. 100 millimetres tops, which is still a lot of rainfall, but it isn't world-ending. It's not where we're talking sort of 200 millimetres, where we're, of course, some pretty significant flooding. Now, back on the Eastern Weather forecast, we're taking a look at the thunderstorms now that will develop Good Friday and into Easter Saturday throughout parts of Queensland, the Northern Territory, South Australia, and then into New South Wales. These will be pulse thunderstorms, so don't be fooled by this big spread of rainfall that's apparent on the forecast models. We just don't have the model resolution to get pulse thunderstorms accurately on the forecast models just yet, but I imagine that'll be something in the next couple of years with the advances that forecast models have taken in the past year or so. I'm really looking forward to that, and I can't wait for some announcements from the forecast models on that part. But anyway, take a look at those thunderstorms. You can see they fire up in South Australia around Mintabee and Coober Pedy around Saturday evening about 5 or 6 p.m. local time, before extending in towards deeper into eastern South Australia, probably by about Saturday evening and into Sunday early morning. And these storms do look like they could be quite strong as well, definitely on the severe end, and could be delivering some very heavy rainfall to parts of South Australia. Once again, a very, very remote part of Australia. You're talking areas the size of countries in Europe that have populations of maybe 5 or 10,000 people that are going to be impacted by these rainfall events. So it's not a huge deal in terms of potential impacts across a lot of South Australia, because this rainfall will fall over incredibly remote areas. However, I mean, looking at rainfall accumulation over the next 5 days, there'll be places, or over the next 10 days, there'll be places that pick up a year's worth of rainfall in probably a 48-hour period. So a lot of rainfall, and I can't stress that enough. There will be some very significant flooding across rural parts of South Australia, down towards maybe Maree and Port Augusta, as far south as what the rainfall will extend down to. So it looks like Adelaide is going to completely miss out on this rainfall. In fact, it does look like the major population centres of South Australia, Adelaide, Robe, Port Augusta, across to Ceduna, they are going to miss out on this rainfall. Which is probably quite disappointing, because those are places that have gone a long time without significant rainfall. The maximum accumulation here on the forecast is 300 millimetres. I do think that will be back down significantly over the next few days. 300 millimetres, that's 3 years worth of rainfall for some of these locations. But again, I wouldn't be writing it off, because if you get a thunderstorm that just sits there for 6 hours, which looks possible at this time, there could be a rain gauge out here that picks up 300 or 2 to 300 millimetres in a 24-hour period. So it's something that we're going to be watching very closely, that's for sure, on this channel, because this does look like a once-in-a-year rainfall event for South Australia. I know the weather news is going to talk this up as being a once-in-a-decade or a once-in-a-100-year. Nah, this is really just once-in-a-year event. Typically, this part of South Australia, they do receive their annual rainfall on 1 or 2 days. It does cause flooding. It does cause a lot of problems deep out here in the desert, but it isn't world-ending, and it isn't the end of the world out here. They will probably be cut off from areas for maybe 2 or 3 days, but again, it dries pretty fast out in the desert, especially when you've got humidity values tickling 0% and temperatures approaching 35-40 degrees Celsius in the day. These rainwaters do dry out pretty quick. These rivers do not last for long, and it looks like Lake Eyre might get another top up here. I think Lake Eyre already does have some water in it, so this will definitely add to that total of Lake Eyre, and if it doesn't, it's going to feed the tributary rivers that flow into Lake Eyre. So for people that want to see water on Lake Eyre or in Lake Eyre, this is some great news, that's for sure, as there should be some water that moves through there. Now, I am noticing that we could have a possible east coast low set itself up in the Tasman Sea, probably towards the end of the forecast period, which will be associated with the remnants of this kind of big band of tropical moisture that moves through, and that will create a very wet period come next Tuesday and Wednesday for Tasmania and Victoria, where we could be seeing up towards 150 or 200 millimetres fall there, and some very strong winds indeed. I'm not completely sold on this forecast again, because the forecast has changed so much in the past couple of days for areas of Victoria and New South Wales. It's kind of very difficult to keep up on top of it. I mean, a few days ago I was calling for snow in Tasmania as per the GFS forecast. That got completely dropped, of course. So yeah, I'm not going to be making comments on the forecast conditions for parts of southern Australia just yet. I'm going to wait until maybe about Saturday or Sunday to really comment on the possibility of this east coast low. But again, it is still a chance at this time, and it will probably cause a bit of a headache for Tasmania, especially this early on in the winter season, because it will feel like a winter system, driving temperatures down and rainfall up. Anyways, that basically does it for this morning's weather update. Nothing too interesting happening across Australia right now. I mean, this satellite imagery says it all. It looks quite boring nationwide, just a bit of cloud here and there, some rainfall for Brisbane and some heavy rainfall up in far northern Queensland, but yeah, apart from that, it's looking high and dry. We're definitely moving into that more settled autumn period for Australia. That is the latest that I have on the weather conditions. If you haven't already, then please do consider subscribing, and also leave a like on the video while you're at it. A special shout out to the channel sponsors, their names on screen. Thank you guys, your support really does mean a lot, and if you too want to get your name mentioned at this part of the video, then please do click the join button down below and select the channel sponsors button. It's a small price to pay, and it sponsors the software used to make these videos, because this Windy subscription is a paid subscription, and it's a great subscription as well. I do recommend all of you guys checking out windy.com. It's a fantastic piece of software, and it has helped me give accurate and great forecasts for a lot of Australia for the past couple of months. So thank you so much for watching them, and I will catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.